Hello everybody, and thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedules to join us today. Today we're going to talk about ways to increase retention and reduce your turnover costs. So let me just really quickly go over the agenda for today's session. We're going to touch on a couple of topics here. Just a bit of difficulty. Here we go. So first of all, we're going to take a look at what is turnover. What does it entail? If we want to do anything about it, we need to understand why employees are leaving. And some of the other things that we'll talk about is like, what is the actual cost of turnover? A lot of people seem to think that turnover is a good thing, and it can be, but there are a lot of hidden costs. And I think you'll be pretty shocked to learn how quickly they add up and how much they can hurt your bottom line. We'll also touch on the 5 key strategies for retaining your best employees. And lastly, I'll discuss how to implement one of those retention strategies, which is providing flexible working schedules using a concept called collaborative scheduling. So with that, let's jump into what is turnover. And just for fun, I had to throw this in there. Obviously, it's turnover. We're not talking about the pastry, so if anybody was expecting a cooking session, this is not the right webinar for you. Turnover is when your employees leave, and employees leave organizations for all sorts of reasons. Some of them find a different job. Still others decide that they're going to go back to school and improve their education, chances of progressing in their careers. Others sometimes follow a spouse who's been transferred to another location for a new job. And more and more people these days actually are taking retirement and removing themselves from the workforce. And the opposite of that is other people who sometimes get angry and about something and they're quitting on an impulse. And the flip side of that is the ones who decide they're not going to do a good job and end up getting fired or unfortunately get laid off. And then also there are some really lucky people out there that they come into money, either a lottery win or an inheritance, and decide they no longer need a job. So these are all examples of turnover, but they don't all have the same implications to your organization. So in order for us to be able to distinguish the implications that these types of turnover have on your organization, we need to define the types of turnover that are out there. So let's start with at the very top, and the first distinction is whether turnover is voluntary or involuntary. So voluntary turnover obviously is a turnover initiated by the employee. For example, we talked about employees leaving for a new job, so that's voluntary turnover. Involuntary turnover is turnover initiated by the employer. As from our examples, when the company dismisses an employee for poor performance, or there's an organizational restructuring. So for today's purposes, our discussion is going to focus on voluntary turnover because we really want to understand why employees leave or stay and what strategies we can employ to manage that turnover. So within voluntary turnover, you'll have 2 types of further distinctions, and that's a functional and dysfunctional turnover. So dysfunctional turnover is the type of turnover that's harmful to the organization, and this can take many forms. For example, the departure of high-performance employees or those with hard-to-replace skills, and in general, turnover rates that lead to high replacement costs and disruption in operations are defined as dysfunctional. So they have negative impacts on your organization. Functional voluntary turnover is not harmful to the organization, and examples of that include departures of employees who are poor performers or those that have easy to replace skills. So the distinction between functional and dysfunctional turnover is relative. What makes an employee valuable and difficult to replace will differ based on the job, the industry, and economic factors. However, high turnover is still dysfunctional even if the skills are easy to replace. The cost to recruit, hire, and train new replacement employees is still significant, And a high turnover rate can impact your bottom line pretty significantly. It can also suck up resources and time that could be better spent on figuring out how to scale and grow your business. So we'll talk about costs in a little bit. So within dysfunctional types of turnover, we have further distinctions, and that's unavoidable and avoidable. So in general, turnover is unavoidable. You can't please all the people all of the time. Similarly, no matter how much you invest, some people will still leave. So what's the distinction between avoidable and unavoidable? So avoidable turnover results from causes that your organization may be able to control. For example, turnover due to low job satisfaction. That's something that you might be able to address. Unavoidable turnover results from causes over which you probably have no control. Examples of that include people leaving because they want to go back to school or having to relocate for a spouse's job. So for our purposes today, we are going to focus on avoidable causes that your organization can influence and affect the turnover rates. And we'll get into those strategies in a little bit. But before we do that, some people are still wondering, why worry about turnover, right? I mean, it's not like there's a shortage of people looking for work these days. Why should I worry when there's more than enough candidates applying for jobs? And you can basically take your pick. Well, there's several reasons why you should focus on retention even in times of high unemployment. First of all, even high unemployment does little to deter the high-performing employees or employees with high-demand skills from leaving. If you ignore retention, you may inadvertently be sending the wrong message to the employees that you want to keep, that retention is not important to you, and they may decide, well, maybe I want to go find an employer that does care about me as an individual. Secondly, I'm not so sure that the days of high unemployment are still here. Recent surveys starting to show that unemployment situation has stabilized since about 2010, and employees who've been waiting for alternative employment options, they're now starting to find that the time is right to move, and we're beginning to see that employee turnover is on the upswing. Organizations that systematically manage retention in good times and bad will obviously stand a greater chance of weathering talent shortages as they occur. So why does turnover matter? Well, for three key reasons. One, as I mentioned before, it can be costly, and we're going to talk about these costs in a second. Two, it definitely affects business performance. It does have an impact on your organization's revenue as well. And unless you tackle it now, it just becomes increasingly difficult to manage. So let's start with the costs. And given all of the activity and research that goes into understanding the cost side of businesses, running a business, it's surprising to find out how little awareness or research has gone into understanding the costs of turnover. When people are asked, like, do you know the cost of employee turnover for your organization? When it comes to direct costs, that number is only 17%. So only 17% of all organizations know what the direct cost of turnover is for their organization. And when it comes to indirect costs, that number drops even lower to under 9%. And that's because a lot of people don't understand what the indirect costs are, or they don't have a way to measure that. So if you're wondering what these types of costs are, let's just go quickly through what's entailed in direct and indirect costs. So direct costs are those that are involved with the hiring, firing, recruiting, interviewing, and training employees. So not just the cost of restructuring the existing employees, but also the cost to bring on their replacements. And I'm going to get into a little bit about how long these costs, how long it takes you to actually recover these costs once you've incurred them. So some of the stuff that people don't really think about when it comes to turnover are the hidden costs And these include, but they're not limited to, things like loss of productivity. When there's a disruption to your staffing, the other employees have to pick up the workload of the employee that's left. The potential loss of business, the loss of expertise when somebody with high value IP leaves the company, and also the administrative costs that are involved with the replacement of the employees that have left. So these costs can impact your business beyond measurable financial loss. In particular, high turnover costs could result in dissatisfied customers, and as I mentioned, in turn reduce revenue streams. So what are the costs of replacing employees? Well, according to these calculations done by the Society for Human Resource Management, the average cost of replacing an employee that's earning approximately $8 an hour is roughly $3,500. Middle-level employees can be high as 150% of their annual salary, and high-level employees are upwards of 400% of their annual salary. And depending on the level of turnover you've got, these numbers can really add up and quickly impact your business for the long term. So despite the high cost of replacing employees, as I said, some employee turnover is necessary and unavoidable, but as you can see here, high turnover can and should be eliminated. And I also mentioned that turnover can affect business performance. So anytime there's significant turnover, for the remaining employees, it's not going to be a fun time. And if the level of turnover makes your organization look like a revolving door, this can really erode morale amongst the remaining employees. If the employees that are leaving hold significant social capital within the organization, their loss can negatively influence the mood amongst the remaining employees. And as I mentioned before, the loss of departing employees means that an additional workload is placed on those who are remaining, further exacerbating the situation. And if for anyone who's actually ever survived a reduction in force in an organization, you know full well what this means for your workload, and that's that your workload is going to increase, and in a worst case situation, this could also negatively impact sales until the situation becomes stabilized. So it's really important that we want to try and minimize the impact of turnover. And then, as I said, if you don't get a handle on this now, retention just becomes more and more difficult to manage as time goes on, and especially now. So I talked a little bit about the impending talent crunch, and there's all kinds of opinions and discussions about whether demographic and labor market trends signal an impending shortage of overall labor supply. So, for example, according to Manpower Inc., demographic shifts, so that's aging population, declining birth rates, economic migration, social evolution, which is and social evolution and inadequate educational programs, globalization, and some of the entrepreneurial practices today, such as outsourcing and offshoring, are starting to cause some labor shortages, not only in the overall availability of talent, but also more significantly in the specific skills and competencies required. More and more observers agree that a talent scarcity is looming, and that this shortage is going to make finding and keeping the right people with the right skills increasingly challenging for organizations. In a Society of Human Resource Management survey of HR professionals, 62% of the respondents reported already having difficulty hiring workers with the skills essential for a 21st century workforce. And a lot of business leaders are starting to worry this problem is going to worsen with the demographic shifts, such as the wave of retirement among aging workers, and inadequate educational systems, and increasingly mobile employees, and even the generational differences in perceptions about the nature of work and careers. It's all going to likely aggravate matters further. So HR professionals who take time now to create strategies for dealing with these developments are obviously going to put their organizations at a competitive advantage. So we're going to talk about why employees are leaving. But before we do that, let's talk about when they leave. So an interesting fact that can actually be quite useful in helping deal with turnover is the fact that the majority of all turnover, 52%, occurs on average in the first year of employment. Based on a survey done by a company called Talent Keepers, year one turnover peaks right around the 12-month mark at 27%. So we can see that, hey, improving retention in the first year can actually add big savings because when a new employee shows up for the first day, that person represents pure cost and a lot of potential. A time to productivity analysis, usually done by job category, can give you an indication of when that employee's productivity has increased to a point where their contribution exceeds their cost. For example, if threshold productivity occurs on average at the 13-month mark, anyone who leaves with less time on their job is to some degree a financial loss. So being able to retain those employees during that 12-month period, obviously it can impact the savings that you're going to incur and the impact on your organization as well. So let's get into a little bit more about why employees leave. So again, I'm borrowing some research from a company done by some research done by a company called Talent Keepers. And as you can see here, the top two reasons why employees leave in the first 12 months are basically, ineffective selection and poor fit based on the skills required. So that's the hiring and selection process. And then number two is missed expectations on job duties and work schedules. So in order to really manage that turnover spike at the 1 year mark, any retention-based strategies have to focus on selecting the right people, effectively onboarding them so they commit and engage to the organization within the first year. So let's get into the top 5 strategies for reducing turnover. And I'm going to start with number 1, which is basically selection. So making sure that you hire the right people from the start. Most people agree that's the single best way to reduce employee turnover. Interview and vet candidates carefully, and not just to ensure that they have the right skills, that they're the right fit in terms of skills for the role, but more importantly, that they are the right fit for your company's culture. I believe that when you're hiring, first look to make sure that this person's attitude and behavior fits with the company culture. Are they going to fit with the other employees? Are they going to fit with the people who are going to manage them? And then look for the right talent fit. A lot of there's been some news over the last couple of weeks about big data and using that to find and hire the right talent. And there was a very interesting article in the New York Times with the head of HR from Google, who in the past had used a lot of different quizzes and questionnaires trying to test people's IQ and aptitude. And it turns out, all these tricky questions about, why are manhole covers round, how much would you charge to wash all the windows in Seattle, they were meaningless. They actually had no impact in determining that employee success within the company. And now what they're focusing in on is culture and also making sure that you understand how these people are going to react and behave. So asking them situational questions is a better predictor of how they will perform within your company. I'm not really going to get into a lot of solutions here because there are more than enough companies out there that can provide you with the solution to assist you to find and hire the right talent. Number 2 is compensation. So not is it just important to make sure you have the right people, but you want to make sure that you've got the right compensation and benefits as well. So really working with human resources and any external consultants to get current data on industry pay packages, and also making sure that that you're sensitive to local market conditions, and when necessary, along with the benefits, look at flexible work schedules and bonus structures. And don't be just Don't be stagnant with this information. Make sure that you review compensation benefits packages at least annually. And again, as I said, pay attention to the trends in your local marketplace as well. Number 3 is engagement. So you want to bolster employee engagement. All employees need social interaction and a rewarding work environment. Let's face it, they spend most of their lives at work. And what they're looking for is respect and recognition from their managers and a challenging position with room to learn and move up. This is what your best employees are actually looking for. So one way to do that is to outline challenging and clear career paths. The employee wants to know where they could be headed and how they can get there. So, make sure that you've got annual reviews and the mid-year checks. These are obvious venues for discussion. But I think you should also encourage workers to come to you with career questions and wishes throughout the year, not just make this the quarterly or annual discussion. Number 4 is making sure that you have a positive work environment. And I think a lot of managers will often overlook how important a positive work environment is for staff and how far meaningful recognition and praise from managers can go to achieve that. Awards, recognition, and praise might just be the single most cost-effective way to maintain a happy, productive workforce. With a lot of organizations that I've been in the past, it's often the salespeople who are getting the recognition, and oftentimes that's the only group in an organization that gets recognized because it's really easy to measure their performance. How many people out there have worked for a company where the top performers in sales all go off to their annual sales club and the rest of the company, goes unnoticed and sits around? I think, some of these suggestions about the recognition and awards, you need to apply that to people outside of sales, make sure it's applicable to everyone within the organization. And again, don't wait for the end of the year to do this, if you can fit it into a quarterly occurrence or a monthly, an award or a recognition piece on a monthly basis, that goes a long way. I've worked in too many companies where it's, they wait till the end of the year and the salespeople all go off to club and the other people might get recognized because they were there for 5 years. But as we can see, turnover, your employees are at most risk for turnover in that first year. So you want to make sure that they understand that they are working in a positive work environment. And I saved this one for last because I want to go into a little bit more detail, but it's flexibility. How do you achieve that work-life balance? Paying attention to the employee's personal needs and offering more flexibility when you can. Give employees the opportunity to choose their own schedule, to create that balance between their work and their life. Where possible, offer scheduling or collaborative scheduling to help them as well, and your organization find the appropriate equilibrium for you and your staff. For many, lack of employer work schedule flexibility is often the #1 reason that people voluntarily leave their organization. So one of the reasons I want to delve into this topic a little bit more is essentially because, even though it's been around for a while, collaborative scheduling is a concept that's fairly unknown to a lot of people. So let's start with 3 basic tenets of the collaborative scheduling process. And those are the collection of scheduling preferences from the employees, incorporation of those scheduling preferences into resource planning, and then the distribution and confirmation of the schedules with your staff. So first off is the actual collection of scheduling preferences. So firstly, collaborative scheduling entails shifting the responsibility of collecting employee scheduling preferences, such as availability and time off requests, into the hands of the employees themselves. So with most collaborative scheduling solutions, the employees can electronically submit information through either a web-based or phone-based self-service applications. So what this does is shift the burden of data collection from the shoulders of management to the employees themselves. We have an example here at Slake's in the education sector. One of our customers, a Midwestern university, they used our web-based self-service software to schedule their roughly 750 student staff. When a new semester kicks off, students access the application over the internet to enter their availability, and then they can indicate any changes as conflicts arise. So as a result, the supervisors have availability details as soon as students enter it, instead of having to wait more than a day for manual entries as they previously had been doing. In addition to that, they also receive fewer calls from students regarding changes, and in turn, departments lessen the workload during the busiest times and throughout the semester. So what's really happening here is by giving employees the power to submit their own availability, it's not just empowering them, it's also reducing the workload on the shift planners and the managers as well. So once you've collected the availability information from the employees, the next step is incorporating that into the shift planning itself. So, and collaborative scheduling also automates this incorporation of employee shift preferences in the schedule creation process. So employee submissions automatically feed into the business rules of an associated employee scheduling solution, so that in addition to alleviating manual data entry, schedulers are given automatic notifications when shifts are inadvertently assigned outside an employee's specified range of availability. So if, as they're creating the schedule, if they mistakenly schedule an employee for a shift that they are not available for, it'll alert the scheduler, or it'll prevent them from scheduling that employee. Because the web-based collaboration empowers students to enter the availability themselves, the supervisor is able to begin scheduling without any manual entry. So they have that information already at hand. And as I mentioned, in the past, students had to submit their class schedules and availability on paper forms, and then the managers would enter that information to Excel spreadsheets from there. Then staff members had to somehow keep this availability in mind while creating the employee schedule and ensuring that each student received adequate hours. In total, the entire process could take up to a full week, just when supervisors were usually at their busiest. And because of multiple rounds of rekeying information, the entire employee scheduling process was error-prone and risky. So if one person's schedule was off, it had the ability to derail all the other schedules as well. And the scheduler often had to start all over again from scratch. So according to the Assistant Director of HR Student Development at the university, because of student collaborative scheduling, over the course of a semester, department supervisors were able to save 150 to 200 hours of scheduling time, which freed them to focus on other areas of their job. And then the last piece is the schedule distribution and confirmation. So in addition to automating the means in which the employee information comes in, collaborative scheduling also automates the flow going out by formalizing both the employee schedule distribution and confirmation process. So collaboration tools that can be accessed over the internet or telephone, employees are able to access, view, and confirm up-to-date schedules. As an example, we have a customer in the healthcare sector who is a Michigan-based in-home in-home care provider, and they use a telephone-based collaborative tool to publish and distribute employee schedules. Previously, they distributed the schedule to the employees via mail, which really left little time between when they received the employee schedules and when the employee schedules began. So when client appointments changed, they had to resend affected schedules, which was incredibly inefficient. Employee schedule confusion created frequent staff calls to the office, as well as calls from clients when staff were late or didn't show up. According to the lead administrator at this home healthcare service, in their business, every single issue is an emergency issue. They're talking about getting people taken care of, and it's a very fast-paced environment. Anytime there was a mistake, the phone would be ringing off the hook. Their phones were going 100 miles a minute. So however, instead of having to mail employee schedules out, what happens now is the employees actually call in each Thursday to the phone system, and they can hear their schedule for the upcoming week. So there's never any confusion or worry whether an employee receives the schedule on time because it's available over the phone. Plus, when employees call an automated line, rather than always calling staff with questions, this also significantly reduced the daily calls that management was receiving. And employees are also able to confirm that they are accepting the shift, so the managers know that, hey, this person will show up for this shift, so there's fewer missed calls or missed shifts, and they have fewer calls from clients who are waiting for someone to show up. The healthcare service estimated that by eliminating mailing the weekly schedule, that saved their business about $10,000 in postage and colored paper every year. And then there's a further concept that I want to talk about, which is employee self-scheduling. So despite its many benefits, collaborative scheduling is really only the beginning when it comes to management efficiency and employee satisfaction. Employee self-scheduling is the latest paradigm in workforce scheduling. It basically means giving employees the ability to create most of the schedule themselves. Employee self-scheduling gives employees the freedom to choose from a list of available shifts by programming the scheduling solution to maintain and incorporate all the required business parameters, such as overtime restrictions and minimum rest periods. So at the end of the day, management really only is responsible for filling in the few shifts that remain unclaimed. So as an example, there's 5-Star Event Services, which is the largest provider of staffing and security services for events in the Houston area. They use an employee self-scheduling solution to manage their employees. Previously, all their employees had to call the office to provide availability and request shifts, and at times this required them to wait on the phone for 15-20 minutes before talking to someone. However, now what happens with employee self-scheduling, employees can view the shifts that are available in a calendar or a list view, and then they can drill down for complete event details, and then they simply check the boxes of the events that they would like to work, and the system automatically schedules them in. The software actually ensures the employees never sees shifts that conflict for those which they have already been scheduled or for those which they are not qualified. Employees also can't cancel a shift online, preventing last-minute changes without at least a call to the office. So this frees up the office staff from tedious work once required to get employees slotted into the shifts, and effortlessly elevates employee satisfaction in the process as well. So Bobby Jones, who's the manager at 5-Star Event Services, says that it's really alleviated a lot of the phone traffic with employees calling about shifts, which helps them retain good employees. And you know, with the reduced burden on managing the scheduling process, they're also able to shift their focus to growing their company without having to bring on additional schedulers and add more jobs without adding more staff. So just to recap some of the benefits of collaborative scheduling. So, you know, it results in greater management productivity by automating scheduling tasks and alleviating the error-prone manual processes. Results in a positive effect on employee satisfaction with timelier schedule distribution, more accurate reflection of employee preferences, and increased employee involvement. And despite the fact that it's still relatively unknown, more and more organizations are actually automating employee scheduling as part of a comprehensive strategy to realize both monetary and qualitative rewards. At its most basic level, employee scheduling minimizes operational costs through more efficient workforce deployment, as well as improves customer satisfaction and retention through an improved allocation of labor resources. So I'm just going to wrap up our presentation for today at that.